The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
It's the last show of the year, and today I bring you news that actor Bill Cosby has been arrested and charged with criminal sexual assault in a decade-old case by prosecutors in the Philadelphia suburb of Elkins Park. These are the first charges brought officially against Bill Cosby, who has been accused by over 60 women of some combination of drugging, rape, and sexual assault in incidents dating all the way back to the mid-1960s. This would likely be the most notorious celebrity-type case since the Michael Jackson child molestation case of 2005. Cosby, spending only 10 minutes at his arraignment, was helped in and out of the courthouse. Lawyers say he is nearly blind due to severe eye problems. He pleaded not guilty, posted $1 million bail by putting down 10% and turning over his passport as called for under Pennsylvania law. The official charges are second-degree aggravated indecent assault, defined as penetration without consent of the victim, who in this case is former Temple University employee Andrea Constant. If convicted, Cosby could face up to 5 to 10 years in prison and up to a $25,000 fine. Quote from a prosecutor: pills were provided, wine was provided, the victim was frozen, paralyzed. A person in that condition is not able to give consent. Constant did accuse Cosby in 2005, alleging that he drugged and sexually assaulted her when she visited his then home in Montgomery County outside of Philadelphia. Now, this is where it gets interesting. There's a 12-year statute of limitations to bring charges in sexual assault cases in Pennsylvania, and that 12-year period was set to expire at the end of January, this January 2016. In 2004, prosecutors said there was not enough evidence to go forward with charges, and many people emailing me, Lewis, saying, David, there is really not more evidence now, but what this is an attempt to get charges in before the statute of limitations expires, with the idea that official charges may allow more evidence to come forward and to provide more time to gather evidence. Many people saying that doesn't suggest anything about whether there is or is not guilt, however.
Right. And, ultimately, there really may not be much of a case at this point anyway. You have someone's word against Cosby's word, and it can be very difficult. That's
the issue. Reasonable doubt. Criminally, this may be a tough case. But remember that Bill Cosby was sued by Andrea Constant civilly, and a settlement was reached, the details of which are sealed. But, of course, the fact that there was a settlement reached and a civil suit is not evidence for a criminal trial. Legal experts saying this will be a tough trial.
Yeah, no doubt. And they clearly just needed to make this happen before the statute expired. I mean, I guess I'm glad it's happening. I think that it's pretty clear that a lot of shady stuff happened at the hands of Bill Cosby.
And people will say, oh, but Lewis innocent until proven guilty, blah, blah, blah. Again, Lewis is not talking criminally, given the legal system. Lewis is saying we have 60 victims here. We have accusations from people who don't even know each other that match in terms of the MO and in terms of the style, the odds, just the preponderance of charges here, the odds, accusations, the odds that Cosby did nothing are relatively slim.
Yeah, and this is not a conspiracy to bring down an elderly, irrelevant comedian at
blind
this point.
Guy at this point,
He's just blind. I know, there's no conspiracy here.
Let's talk a little bit about 2016 and 2015. 2015 was the best year ever for the David Pakman Show, and we have only you, our viewers and listeners, to thank. Nearly 45 million YouTube views in 2015, 60,000 new YouTube subscribers, by far the best YouTube numbers we've had. The goal for 2016, 60 million views and adding 100,000 subscribers. I guess what you would call a stretch goal, Lewis, but one that in an election year I think is attainable if we make the right moves.
I think so. Why not? It's we're supposed to reach a certain point where the growth starts picking up, right? And I don't think we've hit that point yet, but it's
really
all just
because
theoretical.
we've had very good growth increase. I mean, if you still think we haven't hit it, that's a fantastic thing.
Yeah.
1.5 million podcast downloads in 2015, our best numbers there. The show is approaching air times on 200 radio and television affiliates, in addition to our great partners at Free Speech TV on DirecTV and Dish Network, a record for new members, and big plans for 2016. Election coverage, including coverage from primaries. That, I think, will be a great new thing, Lewis, that we've never done before.
Yes, it's going to be interesting. I hope we can line up some good interviews and talk to some people there. It's, you never really know what to expect.
Also, longer form pieces, including one debuting in the second week of January, 2 more already in the works. And of course, we want to kick off 2016 as strongly as possible. So tomorrow, January 1st, 2016, we will be having a 2016 related membership discount. This is huge. I would argue, Lewis, it is the most compelling and titillating membership special we've ever offered. All you need to do to be notified about this membership special is get on our mailing list at davidpakman.com. Tomorrow, I don't know if we've decided what time. I believe 2 p.m. Eastern time. You will get an email with instructions on how to take advantage of this great new membership special. So it's the last show of the year. We are going to count down some of the biggest stories and biggest moments on the show of the year, and I'm glad you're with us.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Today's new member of the day, the final new member of the day for 2015, is Clyde Bradford. Clyde, thank you so much for being a David Pakman Show member. You can join Clyde at davidpakman.com/membership. We are now going to look back at some of the biggest and most watched stories that we covered in 2015, and one of those was a story we broke about an African-American man in Ohio who was stopped by police because he made direct eye contact, and apparently that was suspicious. We will also review some other big stories involving police and non-white Americans from 2015, including police pepper spraying a man having a stroke, a medical emergency, and of course that story from a couple months ago of a police officer flipping a black girl who was sitting in her desk at school and basically treating her as if she was a mop all over the floor. 3 very big stories on our show 2015, and 3 stories that went viral. One as a result of our breaking that story. Let's review 2015. I was in touch with friend of the show, David Sparks, who's from Ohio, the other day, and he told me that a man named John Felton, who's a black American, posted a video to his Facebook page of being pulled over by police in Dayton, Ohio, and ultimately told that he was pulled over for making direct eye contact with the police officer. This is absolutely crazy. John Felton posted on Facebook that Dayton police trailed him for almost 2 miles before pulling him over in front of his mom's house. The initial reason, and I don't know that anybody has played this video, Lewis. This is something that was sent to us directly. I've been in touch with John Felton, who is the man in the video. He initially asked about why he was pulled over, and he was pulled over, as I'll play for you, not because he didn't use his turn signal, but because the officer believed he didn't use his turn signal 100 feet before initiating the turn. We're talking about a technicality of technicalities here. Here's part 1 of the video.
Good. My name's Officer Besser of Dayton Police Department. The reason I'm pulling you over today, sir, is because you didn't signal 100 feet prior to your turn. I saw you turned your turn signal on, but you didn't turn it on 100 feet prior.
Did I say he was going to do all this? I watched you trail me the whole time. I said, well, I don't know why this cop is behind me. I'm glad I got my video camera on, too.
Well,
I did signal.
Okay.
I did signal. You just needed a reason to pull me over.
I'm acknowledging that you did signal. Okay, I'm acknowledging that you signaled. You just didn't do it 100 feet prior to your turn.
You just needed a reason to pull me over, sir. Okay. Is there a reason other than that? Because I did signal.
Do you have your license and insurance on you, sir?
I have everything.
Okay.
So after this, the officer goes back to the police car, eventually comes back, and reveals the real reason why he chose to pull Mr. Felton over. Mr. Felton having a sense that this explanation, well, you signaled, but it wasn't exactly 100 feet before you turned. And now it turns out that there was another factor here that made the officer pull over Mr. Felton. I will warn you, there is some strong language here. Take a look.
No disrespect, I don't have nothing against police officers, but all the shit that's going on now, that's some scary shit. To have a police officer just trailing you, and then you just pull me because you said I didn't signal. What? Do you know how that looks? You drive without being in the cop car, right? You know how it is when the police pulling you over. You're like, I'm not doing nothing. Why is he? Every move I make, why is he making it? I'm not doing nothing. Okay. Because I have a Michigan plate. Other than that, why was you trailing me?
Because you made direct eye contact with me and held on to it when I was passing you on Salem.
I made direct. I didn't even see you until you were behind me. I'm not going to argue that anymore,
sir. If you want to keep talking about it, I'll just take your license back and give you a citation for the violation. We can take it to court.
That's right. Because you made direct eye contact with me. A stunning admission, Lewis. Direct eye contact and you get pulled over. Is direct eye contact considered probable cause or suspicious activity now?
I think in this case, I'm not sure if the explanation was that he started trailing this man because of the eye contact, or he basically pulled them over because of the eye contact. We can say with certitude that the trailing started because of eye contact. And, I would assume that his superiors would condemn this. It's pretty absurd.
If they even became aware of it. As David Sparks told me, other notably racially tinged incidents involving police in Dayton recently. John Crawford was shot in Beaver Creek, Ohio, which is about 15 miles from Dayton. Kylan English, who police claim broke out the back window of a cruiser and propelled himself while handcuffed out of the window of a cruiser and ran and jumped off a bridge. That is another story from the Dayton, Ohio area. And David Sparks himself saying he gets a lot of complaints all the time about street harassment. His wife is black, and he says that she was stopped several times just driving to her parents' house. They live in an upper income, mostly white suburb. And David saying that this sort of flare up with Dayton and Dayton area police is not uncommon. There it is. The reason for this, whether it's the traffic stop or even just initially starting to trail Mr. Felton, because he made direct eye contact with a police officer. And it's funny because noticeably avoiding eye contact with police is also considered something by some police to be suspicious. In either way, you're arguably doing something suspicious.
Yeah, pretty amazing that despite knowing that he was being recorded, he admitted that the trailing started because of this eye contact, like as if that's some type of normal thing that's just, perfectly okay.
We have done many, many stories over the last incredibly close to 10 years about police brutality and improper use of force. And the video I have for you today is one of the worst that I can recall. It's 34-year-old black man, David Washington, who is having a stroke in his car in Virginia. The incident was caught on video. You will see Officer Sean Jurgens walk up to David Washington's car and use his taser on him without warning through the open window. Then another police officer comes up and sprays Washington with pepper spray right in the face. It's reminiscent of casual pepper spray cop Lieutenant John Pike, where it's just this never-ending stream of pepper spray. Washington is basically not moving. He was having a stroke at the time as he's being tasered, as he's being sprayed with pepper spray. And the reason he's not getting out of the car is because he's having a stroke. The video is very disturbing. I will warn you of that before we play it. This is 34-year-old David Washington having a stroke as he is tasered and pepper sprayed by police in Virginia.
Get the car! smoke you. Get out the car. Right now. We ain't playing. Get out the car. That's the point. Get out. Don't move around.
So the video is just stunning. According to Officer Juergens, he said that he thought at the time Washington maybe was under the influence of alcohol or drugs, and that he was concerned because there was a school nearby. An investigation was done by the Fredericksburg Police Department. It showed that Officer Juergens' use of force was not at all in line with department policies. The other two officers at the scene are being investigated by the department. Following his arrest, Washington was taken to a nearby hospital and later released. He has been charged with reckless driving and driving on a revoked license, but ended up not being charged beyond that or further arrested. In other words, he was arrested initially and brought to the hospital because he clearly needed medical care. During the time he was at the hospital, it would seem that the police figured out an actual arrest here and bringing him downtown is not proper. Great work, right? I mean, a man is having a serious medical emergency. He gets tasered and pepper sprayed. Do police really think that when a guy just sort of slumps over motionless in his car, he's doing it simply to annoy them?
Well, first, let me start by saying it looks like these are police-mounted cameras, right? And it's a very good thing we had those here. Otherwise, we might not have seen any of this.
Yeah.
So great thing that those were implemented here. Clearly, the cops are scared. They're afraid. I don't know if white cops are afraid of black people, but from all of the videos and stories we've covered, it would seem that that's the case.
And yes, and we've certainly talked about that issue and the racial disparities. But when you see this, the department has said they don't believe that the actions here were even remotely justified with regard to use of force. Do you agree when you see the video, Lewis, and see this man just sitting in his car getting tasered and pepper sprayed?
Of course. He had one arm down. One arm was in clear sight. Maybe they thought he was going to pull a gun, but police do not get to, they don't get to make those assumptions. You can't assume that someone is going to hurt you. You can't guess that someone is going to hurt you. You need evidence. You need to see that they are about to pull a gun. You need to see a gun. You need to see a weapon. You need to see some act of aggression. And police aren't doing that. They are just, shoot first, ask questions later.
Yeah, if the man was with his arms hidden, not getting out of the car, but very clearly motioning or looking like he's doing something or even moving at all rather than having a stroke, you could say, oh, preemptive use of force made sense there. But the man is essentially motionless. We will see what happens. Could be a huge, huge lawsuit here coming up for David Washington. All right, viral video is making the rounds. South Carolina authorities are investigating an incident caught on two videos, which went viral yesterday afternoon. A white school police officer in Columbia, South Carolina, grabbed a black female student by the neck, flipped her backwards as she sat at one of those desks where the desktop is connected to the chair. You remember those desks, Lewis. It's the ones that you used to disassemble and pour ink all over in protest of any schoolwork. Flips her backwards as she's sitting on the desk, and then just basically drags her around the floor like the guy's using a floor buffer, right? I mean, it's just insane video. Before we go any further, let's show the video to our television audience. If you're listening on the radio or listening to the podcast, I recommend you check out the clip online. It's super easy to find. Let's take a look. In another video, the officer can be heard telling another student, "I'll put you in jail next." What was going on here? Richland County Sheriff Leon Lott said to a local TV station that the officer was responding to a disruptive student who was refusing to leave class at Spring Valley High School. Spring Valley High School has about 2,000 students. 52% are black, 30% are white. Officials have not released the name of the student nor of the officer, but the officer has been identified by students as Ben Fields, and he has reportedly been suspended from his role as one of two school resource officers. Debbie Ham, the superintendent of the Richland County School District 2, says that officials are deeply concerned about this. People online are commenting, Lewis, saying, listen, the girl should have just gone with him, and this entire thing would have been prevented. Since when is a kid just not leaving class? Not violent, no weapons, not a threat to herself or anybody else. Since when is that a law enforcement issue, which, by the way, led to the student being jailed, and ultimately released to her parents?
Yeah, so I guess the student was mouthing off. I don't know. You're right. I think this is to be dealt with by the school. There are ways to do that. There's this trend among police officers that as soon as someone is resisting arrest, it doesn't matter if it's violent or not, that they just decide they're going to do whatever they want to do to this person.
And of course, this is not even resisting arrest because the student was just not going down to the principal's office.
Well, I think at one point what happened was the cop said, "I'm placing you under arrest." And then, if there's any resistance, I mean, even just moving your arm away, well, that's the type of thing that will happen.
That's the green light.
It's unnecessary. I mean, there's no situation in which this girl wins, right?
That's exactly my point, which is by doing this, how are you improving her future by now she's involved with the law enforcement system? You want to talk about the school to prison pipeline? Look at that 14 seconds of video. And what seems to be even more disturbing, we don't yet know if this is true, but one of the 10th graders who was in the class says he was in the class. His name's Aaron Johnson. He tweeted that this all started because the girl was chewing gum, all because of gum. And, thinking back to our days in school, Lewis, we had a student punch a teacher, and we didn't like that teacher, Lewis, but even that teacher knew, and the school knew, that we have to handle this in an administrative way, that taking a 10-year-old and involving them in the criminal justice system is bad for everybody.
Yeah. And, I've seen police officers arrest people who are resisting arrest without violence. It can be done. It's actually very simple.
Sure.
But you've got bad cookies, Dave. You got bad apples here.
At our high school, this would have been unheard of because the school resource officer was too busy having sex with students to flip anybody's desk over. But that's probably a story for another day, right?
Yeah. I think maybe we've discussed that a bit on the bonus show.
3 big stories from 2015 involving police and African Americans. After the break, we will review 3 big stories related to election 2016, really about 3 candidates for 2016. That's after the break. Remember that I am on Twitter at dpacman. Lewis is on Twitter at lewismotamedi. It's the final show of 2015.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
It's the last show of the year, and we're looking at some of the biggest stories of the year. And what bigger story as we got towards the end of this year than the 2016 presidential race? We're going to look at 3 clips that really represent some of the biggest storylines of the 2016 election so far. On the one hand, Bernie Sanders, and we will see Bernie Sanders at Liberty University, where he slayed the crowd. And it really was proof that the ideas of Bernie Sanders, portrayed by so many as these extreme left ideas, actually resonate with Americans from the entire political spectrum. And then we will look at a clip about Donald Trump and a clip about Ben Carson. 2 clips that I believe really tell us the most important things about Donald Trump and Ben Carson, which is that they really don't know a lot of stuff, and they wouldn't make good presidents. Although we hope they will stay in the Republican primary race as long as possible. So reviewing some of the biggest storylines of 2015, Bernie Sanders, no question, one of those biggest storylines, as well as Donald Trump and Ben Carson. Take a look. One of the most interesting individual little stories from these early days of the 2016 presidential campaign happened yesterday. Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders spoke at the private Christian college, Liberty University. This is the traditionally far-right religious school. It's in Lynchburg, Virginia. It was founded by the extremist televangelist and pastor Jerry Falwell. This is a perfect speaking gig for candidates like Rick Santorum or Ben Carson, for Ted Cruz. Remember, everybody, all the student body being forced to go to the mandatory rally for Ted Cruz. Not really a great fit for the more moderate Republicans, and really not a good fit, you would think, for one of the most progressive candidates in a long time, Bernie Sanders. But Bernie Sanders spoke there yesterday. He was asked a question about protecting unborn children, and the entire exchange is absolutely endlessly fascinating, Lewis. The question was about protecting the unborn. Two things to pay attention to. Number one, pay attention to the raucous standing ovation and applause for the anti-abortion, anti-choice language that was used by David Nasser, the house pastor, or whatever he's called at Liberty University, in framing the question. But then, interestingly, pay attention to the reaction to Bernie Sanders' answer to the question. Let's look.
Senator Sanders, you've talked in your campaign about how it is immoral to protect the billionaire class at the expense of our most vulnerable in society, obviously children. You just mentioned that even in your talk with us earlier. A majority of Christians would agree with you, but here's the question. A majority of Christians would agree with you, but would also go further and say that children in the womb need our protection even more. How do you reconcile So the question, sir, is obviously you can see this is what they want to ask. Well, this is what's on there. How do you reconcile the two? And again, I know that you have a different view. I know that you, sir, and I don't have to be eye to eye on it, but I sense a real sincerity in you in wanting to see our children protected. Can you see, sir, how we see the child in the womb as the most vulnerable that needs protection?
I do understand.
Yes, sir.
But I do also understand this is an area where we disagree. I do understand and I do believe that it is improper for the United States government or state government to tell every woman in this country the very painful and difficult choice that she has to make on that issue. And I honestly don't want to be too provocative here, but very often conservatives say, you know, get the government out of my life. I don't want the government telling me what to do. But on this very sensitive issue, of which this nation is divided, right. A lot of people agree with you, a lot of people agree with me. But my view is, I respect absolutely a family that says, no, we are not going to have an abortion. I understand that, I respect that. But I would hope that other people respect the very painful and difficult choice that many women feel they have to make and don't want the government telling them what they have to do.
This clip really shows me what is refreshing about Bernie Sanders. There's nothing that feels crafted or concocted about his answer. It's just his honest view. It should and does appeal to at least some people on both sides. And there was more applause than I would have anticipated for Bernie Sanders speaking at Liberty University.
There was. He wasn't afraid to say that we differ on this issue. And I wonder how many people were actually enlightened when he started bringing up, things about the Republican budget and its lack of morality. But there did seem to be a fair amount of applause even for that. And so, I'm hoping that he has a bunch of supporters in that crowd.
Even the politicians that would be more on the side of the Liberty University crowd, when they're asked questions, they sort of hem and haw and waffle and speak in generalities and talking points. Bernie Sanders stands by his convictions. He explains why these are his convictions. These are the exact same things he says in front of liberal audiences. And he got some cheers for it. This was not ever going to be his crowd, but he gives the same message that he gives to a liberal crowd, and it does to some degree resonate. And this is just further confirmation that the Bernie policies are not fringe extremist ideas. These are the popular mainstream policies. It's just that they get all wrapped up in names like communism and socialism and blah, blah, blah. And that is just a distraction because these are pretty reasonable middle of the road ideas that Bernie Sanders is presenting.
And but people need to keep sharing videos of Bernie Sanders and the Bernie Sanders meme quotes, because that's really how you get this message across. I mean, Dave, imagine if we didn't have social media right now. What would Bernie's name recognition look like without all of that?
Yeah, it'd be even lower than it currently is, and we'll continue to track where that goes. Fascinating. Bernie slaying at Liberty University. Not a headline we would have anticipated. As proof of the fact that I don't think Donald Trump has any clue what he's talking about, we now go to video of Donald Trump over the weekend being interviewed by George Stephanopoulos on ABC's This Week. If you don't like cringing, you might want to tune away from this next segment. Donald Trump has talked for a while now about his immigration ideas. He's going to deport the illegal immigrants. He's going to build a wall, blah, blah, blah. George Stephanopoulos decided to speak very specifically to Donald Trump about how he would do that. Let's discuss the costs. Let's discuss how it would be done. And Donald Trump imploded, completely fell apart. It became abundantly clear he has no idea what he's talking about. Let's take a look at this video. Brace yourselves. Get the children out of the room, because this is absolutely cringeworthy. Take a look.
Look at this from the American Action Forum conservative group. They say the federal government would have to spend roughly $400 to $600 billion to address the 11.2 million undocumented immigrants. Each immigrant would have to be apprehended, detained, legally processed, transported to his or her home country. In turn, this would shrink the labor force by 11 million workers, reduce real GDP by $1.6 trillion. Are you willing to pay that price, and where are you going to get the money?
Well, first of all, they're wrong. And, Jeb is a very low-energy person. He'd never be able to do it. He's the one that said they come out of an act of love, okay? This is an act of love. These are people coming, and many of them, you look at what's happening with the crime, many of them are really causing tremendous problems. And they would be out really fast, immediately. First day we start that movement. We need a wall. We have to get a wall. We need great security, and we're going to have a wall that will be not let people in, George. And by the way, legally, if you're legal, you can come in, and we'll
But let me press you on the cost right there, Mr. Trump. They're saying $400, $600 billion. It would require a big government apparatus to take everybody down. If you don't think those numbers are right, how much is it going to cost, and where are you going to get the money?
Well, it's costing us $130 billion a year, and that's peanuts compared to what the real cost is, George, for the way we have it now. You have so many illegals. We don't even know how many illegals. I hear 11 million. I hear 30 million. The government has no idea. We have lost control of our country. We've lost control of our borders. The government has no idea how many illegals there are. I've been hearing 11 million for 5 years. Then the other day I heard 30. Nobody has any idea.
So if there's no idea,
control.
How are you going to round them all up? Where are you going to get the money? Where are you going to get the forces? Exactly how are you going to do it? What are the specifics here?
It's called management. The first thing we have to do is secure the border, but it's called management. And we'll get people back in, the really good ones. We're going to expedite it so they get back in, so they can at least come in legally. But
you
we
keep
have to
declaring how you're going to do it, but you don't say how.
Excuse me, George?
You declare how you're going to do it, but you don't say how.
George, I'm telling you, it's called management. You can do this, and we can expedite the good ones to come back in. And everybody wants that, but they have to come in legally. We have a country. We're a country of laws. We're a country of borders. How can you have a country without a border?
That's right, Lewis. Donald Trump would do it through management. Well, I'm convinced. That sounds like a pretty logical strategy to me.
Management. He is doing what many politicians are guilty of, and that's making promises and saying you're going to do things with no explanation as to how, and usually things that are very expensive. But can he manage his way through this?
I don't think so. And, never mind that the costs combined with the GDP loss would be staggering. Never mind that Donald Trump claims to be a small government conservative, and what he's suggesting would be a hugely intrusive, large government apparatus, as George Stephanopoulos accurately points out. I wonder, this is the concern I have, because it's obvious Donald Trump knows nothing about immigration. Will the Trump fans abandon him when they realize that he doesn't even understand his own ideas, many of which would require absurd government spending or intrusion, which conservatives claim to oppose, as well as violations of U.S. law or trade policy? Will the Trump supporters abandon him when they realize that, or are they sticking with him?
I don't see his followers abandoning him. I think he's already made it pretty clear that he doesn't understand these issues. and they're sticking with him. How much worse is it going to get? I guess if he wins the primary and has to debate whoever, it might become more clear. But are they going to vote for the Democrat after that? No.
Probably not. And if you look at some of the comments online to video clips of this exchange and news articles written about this, there are conservatives who are saying, oh, George Stephanopoulos was being overly aggressive and sandbagging Trump. George Stephanopoulos just asked the question, how will you do this? And then said, hey, here's some data about this. How will you do this? And Trump had no answer other than management. If your critique is of George Stephanopoulos, you're either willfully ignorant or just blind to the reality of that exchange.
It was like being angry at Katie Couric for asking Sarah Palin, what do you read? And, was that sandbagging? I don't think so. Was that gotcha journalism?
Louis, that was a completely unfair question. Nobody knows what they read unless they've been prepped on what they read by their staff. And that was absolutely gotcha journalism. I was interested to read an article in the New York Times yesterday, which was posted to our David Pakman Show subreddit at davidpakman.com/Reddit, which explained that Ben Carson, the Republican presidential candidate, has really been having trouble grasping foreign policy. According to his own advisors, he seems to just not get it. And this became much more clear in the last week. Ben Carson, number one, claiming that China has intervened militarily in Syria. That just didn't happen. I mean, it just flat out did not happen. And two of his top advisors said in interviews that he has struggled to master the intricacies of the Middle East and national security, and that even intense tutoring was having little effect. He is being intensely tutored, and it is having no impact. Let's take a look at that a quote from the New York Times article. Quote, nobody has been able to sit down with him and have him get one iota of intelligent information about the Middle East. This is according to Dwayne Claridge, a top advisor to Ben Carson on terrorism and national security. Claridge also said that Mr. Carson needs weekly conference calls to brief him on foreign policy, quote, so we can make him smart. And then it really got bad. When Ben Carson appeared on Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace, I'm calling this Ben Carson's Sarah Palin moment. I'll remind you what I mean by that. This is when Sarah Palin was asked by Katie Couric during the run-up to the 2008 election, name a publication that you read, and then this happened.
And when it comes to establishing your worldview, I was curious, what newspapers and magazines did you regularly read before you were tapped for this to stay informed and to understand the world?
I've read most of them, again, with a great appreciation for the press, for the media.
But like what one specifically, I'm curious that you...
All of them, any of them that have been in front of me over all these years. I have a vast variety of sources where we get our news to. Alaska isn't a foreign country where it's kind of suggested. It seems like, wow, how could you keep in touch with what the rest of Washington, D.C. may be thinking and doing when you live up there in Alaska? Believe me, Alaska is like a microcosm of America.
Yeah, so that was gotcha journalism. As we remember, Louis, Chris Wallace, very similarly, asking a super simple question to Ben Carson. At least it's a question that should elicit a real answer from a leading Republican presidential candidate. You say, Dr. Carson, you want to build a coalition to fight ISIS. Well, who do you build the coalition with? In other words, name a country that is a friend of the United States, right? If we boil it down, that's the question. Name a country that is a friend of the United States. Here's how it happened. It is just embarrassing for Ben Carson. I almost feel bad for the guy.
Sir, controlling. If I may, let me just focus on the military component, because obviously after the slaughter of over 100 people, while all of those are important components, the military component is the most immediate one. And you have said that you would, as president, try to create an international coalition militarily to go after ISIS. How would you put that together? Who would you call first?
Yeah.
Well, what I was just explaining is, how we used the resources that we have. That includes some of our special ops people working in conjunction with an effective fighting force there. Those are the kinds of things that will create enthusiasm as we begin to take back the land, take back the areas, and damage their image throughout the world.
But who would you call first, specifically, to put together an international military coalition?
My point being that if we get out there and we really lead, and it appears that we're making progress, then all of the Arab states and even the non-Arab states, who I think are beginning to recognize that the jihad movement is global. It is not just local in the Middle East. But if we fight it there, they will have to pool their resources in that area, and then we won't have to necessarily fight them here. That's what I'm saying.
But can you tell us who you would call first, sir?
Round 3.
On the international scene.
I would call for all of the Arab states to be involved in this. I would call for all of our traditional allies to be involved in this. You know, I don't want to leave anybody out because
this is just
really,
amazing. Okay, let's stop it there. So it's the same. Sarah Palin was asked, "What do you read?" She said, "Well, you know, I read stuff." And then the follow up was, "Well, just name something." And she says, "I read everything." And Ben Carson's doing the same thing. Well, who would you call? First, it's a non-answer, and then it's, well, I would call all of the Arab states and all of the non-Arab states. He would call every country, Lewis. That's who he would call.
The answer here, well, I mean, my easy answer, just say Israel. Right?
I know. I was thinking to myself, you would imagine that at a minimum, you could at least name some allies we've had, right? Say, well, the UK, we would talk to the UK and maybe France. I mean, they're taking action. They've just been attacked. And of course, you can always say Israel, right? Say anything to avoid looking totally clueless. What do you read? All of them. Who would you call? All the Arab and non-Arab states. Is this going to be called a gotcha question as well?
I think it's a fair gotcha question, right? Because they know that he's not up to speed on foreign policy.
But I don't know that. I mean, you're giving the reporters credit in that they know that this guy's clueless. He presents himself as a Republican candidate. I don't think it's a gotcha question to say, who would be, in your mind, our allies if you wanted to build a military coalition? Just give us a list of countries. Name a single country.
Well, I mean, I think everyone knows that foreign policy is not this guy's strong suit.
That's for sure. Even his advisors know.
Yeah, throw some red meat out there. Republicans love hearing about the alliance with Israel. Throw it out there.
We will, of course, continue following election 2016, starting in 2016 with our next show. We will take our last break, and next, we will look at just a hilarious comment about American foreign policy that stands out to me as one of the funniest clips of the year.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
It's hard to really sum up 2015 in American foreign policy, and this clip is one that kept coming up when I checked out the most popular clips about foreign policy from the year. This is just so funny. It needs no introduction. It represents so much of what is wrong and hilarious and scary about American foreign policy and officials' perception of our foreign policy. Take a look at this classic story from the year. Here's a really funny clip. This is one of my favorite things we've played for you in a while. Recently, Venezuela accused the United States of plotting another coup. And this led to State Department spokesperson Jen Psaki to make a statement about this. And she wrote it off. She said it's ludicrous that the United States is involved in a coup in Venezuela, but she went a little too far. And she said something that really made some of the reporters in the room laugh. Check this out. I love this.
President Maduro last night went on the air and said that they'd arrested multiple people who were allegedly behind a coup that was backed by the United States. What is your response?
These latest accusations, like all previous such accusations, are ludicrous. As a matter of long-standing policy, the United States does not support political transitions by non-constitutional means. Political transitions must be democratic, constitutional, peaceful, and legal. We've seen many times that the Venezuelan government tries to distract from its own actions by blaming the United States or other members of the international community for events inside Venezuela. These efforts reflect a lack of seriousness on the part of the Venezuelan government to deal with the grave situation it faces.
The U.S. has The U.S. has a long-standing practice of not promoting. What did you say? How long-standing is that? I would. In particular, in South and Latin America, that is not a long-standing practice.
Well, my point here, Matt, without getting into
Not in this
history,
case.
is that we do not support, we have no involvement with, and these are ludicrous accusations.
The U.S. actually has a very long history of supporting overthrows of foreign governments, or as the State Department spokesperson said, non-democratic regime change. I think that's kind of the code word. Remember enhanced interrogation techniques instead of torture? Non-democratic regime change, or government overthrows, also known as coups. And it's so funny that she says that there's this long-standing policy, because let me break it down for you a little bit. Iran in 1953, a non-democratic regime change supported by the United States. Guatemala in 54. Congo in 1960. The Dominican Republic in 1961. South Vietnam in 1963. Brazil in 1964, Chile in 1973, Iraq in the first Gulf War back in 1992, and even very recently, the U.S. has been trying to influence regime change and overthrows of governments in Iran, in Syria, on. And just a year ago, the U.S. trying to get involved and influence regime change in the Ukrainian revolution. Sometimes something is so ridiculous that it's hard to even break it down and analyze it in its component pieces, because it's so inaccurate that it is laughable. And I actually sympathize with the reporter for finding this funny, but as funny as it is frustrating how officials in this country, in many countries, but we're in this country, I'll talk about this country, officials outright lie without seeming to have any fear at all of censure or of discipline or of getting fired. This is a complete, it's literally a laughable untruth that led to people in the room laughing at the ridiculous nature of it. And there probably won't be repercussions for the State Department spokesperson. Am I missing something here? Am I seeing something incorrectly? Let me know on Twitter, twitter.com/dpacman. That is it for 2015, unless you're a member. And today we have such a great bonus show. Lewis had an altercation with a littering pedestrian on the way into the studio today. I haven't heard the story. He will talk about it on the bonus show. We will talk about our New Year's Eve plans, or lack thereof, and much more. davidpacman.com/membership. Get the bonus show. We will talk to you in 2016.
The David Pacman Show at davidpacman.com.